Sonic Heartland romance, you know, you have a lot to then throw your armory at, and I think that's really what he did, and I think that's what it. So it relates to Another Green World, but it's also got its own flavour.
There's moments on the final albums that are astonishing. What I always liked about Cluster's collaboration was that you have two almost opposite psyches. You have such two different personalities. Rodelius being very sweet, melodical, repetitive gentleness, and these sorts of mischievous destructions by Moby that makes me laugh. The two are fighting each other, you know? And I think that by adding perhaps that mediating factor, which Eno has been so good at doing as a producer, he often just becomes a catalyst. Perhaps he's not even making many of the sounds, and he's simply creating an environment where they're doing what they're doing in a more productive way.
The two albums not only confirmed that Eno was an innovative musical collaborator, but their success, like the obscure records releases, once again proved that he was able to spotlight and promote marginal artists. Cluster were a relatively unknown act outside of Germany, and these LPs introduced them to a far larger audience.
It brought us a lot of attention. It made we survived with it because these records sold a lot, not really in one short period, but over the years. And now it's still selling. It's still selling. People like these records very much. It's just, I mean, it's just his quality. It's just, he knows what's. I think he obviously knows what when somebody's doing relevant stuff, and he helps to bring it out. I think it's his message in a way, beside his own work.
Eno's work as a musical collaborator continued into July 1976 as he entered Hansa Studios in Berlin to work on the follow-up to Low. This time, he was actively involved in the compositions and introduced Bowie to the oblique strategies, which the singer enthusiastically adopted to develop material in the studio. Yet the process of recording Heroes, which would become one of Bowie's most successful LPs, was not without struggle, and the recordings required the assistance of one of Eno's long-term collaborators before the various pieces finally fell into place.
Bowie hit a creative zero in the studio. Even with Eno, they came to a full stop, a dead stop, where they couldn't get any further. And Eno suggested, well, why don't we bring in other people into this scenario? And Bowie said, who? Well, Robert Fripp is free, he's not doing anything. He's at home in England somewhere in his house, and why don't I give him a ring? And Bowie said, great, and Bowie rang Robert, Eno rang Robert, and said, Robert, sit down, there's someone wants to speak to you, it's very important. And he put Bowie on the phone and said, it's David here, David Bowie, can you come tonight and fly to Germany? We want to record a track, and we want you, recording an album, we want you to be on it. And he said, what? And he said, yes, now. And so literally that's what happened. Fripp was flown to Germany, came from the airport, Berlin airport, to the Hansa by the Wall with his guitar case. Eno said, okay, there you go, here's the track. Start.
So you have a track like Heroes itself, the title track famously started out as this sort of Beach Boys chug, keyboard chug. They gave the call to Robert Fripp, who had been in monastic seclusion until that point, and jetted into Berlin to play on the first record he played on for, I don't know how long, a couple of years, I think. And that was Heroes. They played it back, they played all three takes, and famously Visconti had put all three up to see what they sounded like, and Eno said, let's have all three, they sound great. And essentially that was Heroes, done very quickly. But Brian's involvement in that record ended before the vocals went down.
The second side of the album is definitely dominated by Eno. There are tracks on the second side which are like Moss Garden, which are just pure Eno. It's got absolutely the trademark of Eno's. These things going across the sky, these amazing plane sounds, and of course Bowie's on it playing a koto, but the dominance of the track is Eno. Heroes is a much better record. It's a much more positive record. The song side is very strong. It's a strong V2 Schneider, all those songs. The songs are stronger on side one. The instrumental tracks are again much better. It's definitely the best of the two records.
With Heroes completed, Eno finally set about finishing his fourth solo album proper for Island Records. With such a stop-start approach to the recordings, he had collected dozens of tracks with a large number of players, and because the work was so sporadic, he was struggling to form a coherent whole.
Several sessions, several weeks, months passed by, where he was just accumulating tracks that were becoming more and more of a headache to navigate his way through and to find a way to edit. And this process never really stopped. I mean, it just ground on and on and on until he had enough tracks to make a record. You know, I don't think I'm doing him a disservice to say that, you know, in the end he had to say, well, this record's never going to be finished. Let's agree that it stops here and put it out.
And so, in December 1977, the LP was finally issued. Eno himself had reservations, concerned that an album culled from such disparate sessions would be incoherent, with certain tracks recorded in a recognizable rock format and others taken from his work with Cluster and his own ambient experiments. Yet Before and After Science won widespread acclaim upon its release, and after Another Green World and Discreet Music, the rock press in particular were glad to see the return of Eno the songwriter.
Before and After Science was a really troublesome record to make, because having had a certain degree of success with Another Green World and the various collaborations that followed, he kind of put off what's my next thing going to be, because for the first time he hadn't had a hospitalization where he was lying there thinking, I've got a, you know, the shining light of a new idea has occurred. That didn't occur, so they didn't have time to have a thought, really. And a lot of the ideas he'd had been played out, I think, in the collaborations. In a way, the next logical record would have been Music for Airports, which came out in '78, which was the ambient Dawn record, whereby the whole process of removing the foreground instruments that had begun in the beginning of his solo career had sort of found a logical Rothkoian fruition. Whereas this record in between, Before and After Science, is kind of awkward in that lineage, and I think because it was awkward to make.